Welcome back to the Celebration Pro podcast. I am your host, Karen Hunt, and today I bring on a friend here, Jacque Basile. Is that how I say your last name?
Basile, yeah.
I get it wrong every time. This is like going with the motion and normal for the beginning of our podcast episode. So true tradition, Basile. Jacque Basile. So her and I actually got together when I was doing a little tour of the planners in West Palm Beach, and we were able to connect and talk a little bit more. And what's really interesting about Jacque is she's a part of a wedding planning. It's like a firm, like you have different teams all over the country. And so it's been really interesting to watch their journey. But a little bit about Jacque. She was born in Cleveland, Ohio. She relocated down here to Palm Beach, which is how we connected. And she started off in the real estate game with a nationwide luxury home builder. And since then, she was married 15 years ago. And that's when she first learned of her passion for all the details of event planning. And now she lives in Palm Beach with her husband and her two daughters. So you understand the whole being a parent while, while
it's so
building
fun.
the passion. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and Jacque, so she is very detail oriented and creative, which is why, just falling into the event world has been so perfect for her. Her and her staff have planned over 600 events. They've been featured in Party Slate, Southern Bride Magazine, Best of the Knot Hall of Fame, and you name it, you've seen them around. And Jacque, I'm just so honored to have you here, just chatting with us about all things weddings, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Karen, for having me. Yes, I started. So our offices, we expanded about 5 years ago. Our original office is in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We have since expanded to about 11 locations across the East Coast into Dallas, Texas. So we have our own office owners at each location. We all own our own branches. I own the Florida office. So I'm everywhere from, Orlando down to the Keys, down to I've done weddings in the Bahamas this season. So we're kind of all over. But it's a lot of fun. Everything's different. Every event is different. Every style is different. So it's a lot of fun bringing these events and weddings to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the most part, I'd say 90% of our listeners are directly in the wedding space. We do have a few creative entrepreneurs that are outside of the event space, but they gain a lot of intel. I think it's always great to get perspective in and out of the industry that you're in.
For sure.
Jacque, can you tell us about the business that you're in and how you went from luxury into the wedding world and then now owning kind of a piece of the business?
So it's a funny story. So when I started doing real estate, I was, we had a lot of community events because I worked for a builder and we were building communities, which I really loved, kind of watching dirt and land come to life to a community, to watching it go from, pipes in the ground and infrastructure into families and communities and people at the park and things like that. And we did a lot of community events, bringing the community together. We did a lot of corporate events as well that I was always kind of sticking my 2 cents in, probably shouldn't have, but I was in the position where I was like, hey, what about this? What do you guys think about this? And they were like, so it kind of fluctuated, and we were doing great in real estate. I was working for the builder, and I had met Sarah in our Myrtle Beach office in 2017. And she was actually selling her boat. And it was one of those where we connected and said, hey, let us know when you're going to sell it, this and the other. She was going to sell it through a broker and have it brought down here. And then it turned out to where she was kind of like, hey, I'm not going to sell it to the broker. If you guys want it, you can come up and get it. So we ended up taking a road trip, drove up, met her, and it was, we bought the boat. And it was one of those keep in touch on Facebook, nice to know you type of a thing. And it was probably a few months later, we would send her pictures, she would send us pictures. And I had just a really funky day at work. I wasn't happy. And my husband's like, why don't you reach out to Sarah? Everybody says, since we planned our wedding and I helped plan my cousin's wedding and my sister-in-law's wedding, he's like, I've always said you need to be doing this. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work weekends, all this stuff. So I reached out to her and I was like, let me know if you ever want to expand. And she said, let's see. She flew down, we did some recon, we checked out some, venues, and we walked around and we met and we chatted. And the rest is history. I opened my branch in 2017. Within a year, I had my own office space. I have full-time employees. I have part-time employees. Last year, we did about 65 events total in our Florida office alone. So we are very, very busy with 52 weeks in a year, and we are pretty much off during summer with our certain wedding season in Florida. But it's been absolutely blowing up more than I could ever imagine, and I love it. I have a blast. I morbidly joke that there's a reason we don't plan funerals, but it's a lot of fun. There's stress, there's logistics, there's a lot of details to go in. There's a lot of family dynamics that we have to work around with planning, and different dynamics with the families, and people who get along and don't get along, and stuff like that. But at the same time, as long as we work around it and we work through it, we end up bringing an amazing event to life, and everybody, it's a fun, happy event industry to be in, type of a thing. We hit some bumps in the road with COVID, but no more than
all did.
yeah, exactly. No more than any other business, really, because the funny part is everybody was home and everybody was kind of sitting around planning because there was nothing else to do. They couldn't go to work. They couldn't do this, that, and the other. So it was one of those things to where, even though I wasn't executing events because of all the restrictions, we were booking events like crazy. So I was still planning and booking florists and booking photographers and booking videographers for those events. And then it got to the point where we were finally able to start executing the events. We may have to change a few dates here and there and things like that, but we definitely worked around a lot of things. We ended up doing elopement packages. So that kind of brought us into more of a smaller, bringing things back to the smaller aspect of events. But we also ended up doing a transition package where we could help even couples who weren't our couples rebook their dates, rebook their photographers and all their vendors, work things along that. So you adapt and overcome. And that's a lot of event planning, is adapting and overcoming and having a plan B, C, and D. So it worked out really well. We learned a lot from it. We came out of it stronger, and we're excited that it's all behind us now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this transitions into today's kind of theme, which is, it's kind of it was a lot of the same steps that we had to take with COVID when it comes to something like, your force majeure clause, right? When you have a big storm coming, and being in Florida or really anywhere on the East Coast, even up in Texas, like, we get hit by hurricanes, and a lot of the same things that happened in COVID. Now, COVID lasted a long time, but you're moving events, you're handling really hard questions, really hard situations. You're having to navigate, you're having to pivot. So my question for you is, being that we're often faced with that question of what happens if a hurricane or a large, unexpected event affects my wedding, what are your insights on how a vendor could best handle that conversation?
Well, I think, and that's the fun part about having a planner. And we recommend all of our couples have planners, because we can foresee things that have happened, that are going to happen or could happen, that couples who are just getting married for the first time don't foresee those things. But we, and I always tell my couples, I want you to feel like you're planning with a best friend, but your friend's done like 700 weddings. So it's one of those things where it's like, where a couple will call me and say, no, I need this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, I appreciate what you think you need. However, I know what you need because I've been there, type of a thing. So, one of the main things that we recommend all of our clients do is book wedding insurance. And this is something that's super important. It covers you. It's just like any other insurance, whether it be homeowners or anything like that. They're not going to, because a lot of couples want to wait. Oh, well, we'll wait and see what happens, especially during summer. It covers you up to, they have $50,000 policies, they have $100,000 policies, and it covers you and your vendors should something happen. And it's not just hurricanes. It covers, God forbid, there's a kitchen fire and your venue has to shut down, or there's a flood, it's rainy season, even without a storm, there's a flood and something has to happen, or there's no power, they can't get it on. Anything could happen, and it just completely covers you. And it's like, to me, it's worth the cost for the peace of mind to know that you're covered. You're going to get your deposits back. Your venue's going to get their money. Everybody's going to be happy at the end of the day. And you don't really have to stress over losing all that money.
And it's not overly expensive by any
It's really not. It's
really
when
not.
you're planning a wedding, it's an increment of
Yeah.
the overall budget, and I'm talking in the hundreds, not even in the thousands,
Right.
to
Right.
cover you. It won't, you want to book it early enough in advance to where if there's a name storm, they're not gonna put it out there. But this is something we recommend, and we send a lot of emails out and things like that to people who aren't even our clients, just people who've inquired with us. We
Mhm.
want to make sure that they're covered. I send it out to all of my vendors too, because I may have DJs and photographers and things like that that are friends that their clients are not my clients, and they have other clients. But it's like, you know what, we'll still book the policy for you and get this coverage for you so that you can have that peace of mind as a couple, as a bride, as you know, anybody planning a wedding, even the families of the, just knowing, especially destination weddings. A lot of our couples are flying in to get married in Florida because it's Florida and the Keys and Bahamas and things like that. We did a wedding in the Bahamas in April, and it was a similar, no storms, obviously not hurricane, nothing happened, but it was right when all of that flooding happened in Fort Lauderdale and all the airports were closed. And she had a heck of a time trying to get all of her vendors out, all of her guests flown over to the Bahamas. It's not like you can just book a random flight. It was the Abacos. We ended up helping her we got there on time. Everything was fine with my team, but we ended up helping her, you know, kind of book charter planes to get her vendors over there and to get her guests over there and things like that. So it worked out really well, but wedding insurance would have been very helpful. Again, not even in hurricane season, to make sure she was covered should anything happen to happen.
Right, absolutely. And then there was something in between the lines that you were mentioning, so I'm going to just pull it out. Is that something that Jacque does is, even if it's not her client, she's still giving value. Because what's that going to do? It's going to tell all of her vendors that A, she's professional, she's credible, and she's easy to work with. It's fun to work with her because you know that you're going to be covered. You know you're not going to have that stress.
Yeah.
And they can pass all those feelings along to their clients. So of course they're going to come back and recommend Jacque and her team because they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And
And
anybody else would be like, oh, I already booked another, you know, maybe someone books another planner, but then if their best friend gets married, they're going to remember that Jacque took the time to send them information, even though they weren't the client. Like, it's so key to like lead with value. So
and that's the thing is I'm a huge fan. It's like, it's so funny. My mom got me a pillow a long time ago and it said, I'm not controlling, I just have better ideas. And it's so true because I do, but I don't want to, like,
yeah.
you know, it's like, I have that, you know, basis of planning an A, B, C, and D. And it's like, that's the thing is, I'm a huge fan of controlled environments. So if I can't control the uncontrollable, at least we can soften the blow a little bit with wedding insurance, with making sure you're covered, with making sure you're getting those deposits back and your vendors are getting paid. You know, when COVID hit, everybody was, being super flexible and changing dates and moving dates. But with a storm, we don't know. Things could turn, even if it's not coming towards us, things turn. And then all of a sudden you're out of power for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's flights, that's everything. So
Right.
there's a lot on the line, and planning a wedding, let's be real, it's not cheap. It's an investment. So just like anything else, you want to ensure your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially being in a destination location, sometimes the storms aren't even here. Sometimes it's, you know, half the country's on fire in that moment, or there's a blizzard going on, or fill in your, disaster that might be happening. And just like you would have home insurance, like you're saying, this is a huge investment and on a memory, on an event that is going to define hopefully the rest of your life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay, so when we are faced with these situations, what are some and you've kind of gone over some of these, but when we're talking about, like, we're in the moment, it's happening, what are some of the procedures or best practices that you have in place to overcome these obstacles, or that you might be able to pass on some advice to the vendors, in real time type of thing?
Yeah, so one thing for sure is my team, and I have a team at every wedding, depending on the guest count. I'm not the only one running a wedding. I wish I was that good, but I have an incredible team behind me who is at every wedding with me, who's running weddings with me. I have, somebody in with the guys, somebody in with the girls, somebody in with the vendors, making sure setups accordingly. One thing for sure you want to make sure is, what time is your venue making rain call? even if it's not a hurricane, it's just inclement weather that day. We want to know what time rain call is. I like to let my vendors know well in advance. I want to put it on my timelines of when the venue is making that rain call. So florist is aware. So if there's any rental companies being delivered, we want to make sure that's aware. And they want to know when that rain call is. And then first and foremost, it may just be a little shower. We all know in Florida, there could be 100% chance of rain. It lasts 30 seconds and that's it. But your chairs are still wet. Everything's getting soaked. So we want to make sure that we have that time to dry it off, clean it off, things like that. We did a wedding in Miami a few weeks ago, and the bride was adamant of, I'm not moving my ceremony. I'm not moving it indoors. I don't care if my guests get wet. Well, I get that, but your guests don't want to get wet. They're dressed up, they're in elegant attire, and they don't want to get wet. That being said, she refused to make the rain call. She said she's having it outside. It was about 30 seconds before we were ready to walk her, and it downpoured. And not only downpoured, it lightning. The lightning was insane. It was Miami, and we ended up moving. I have cushion in the ceremony time because every ceremony never lasts 30 to 45 minutes. Every ceremony is about 15 to 20. So my team was all hands on deck with the hotel. We moved every chair inside. We set up a completely different view of her ceremony. We dried off every chair. We got everything running perfectly. And the main thing is it's not even about your guests getting wet. This first and foremost is the safety factor. If there's lightning, if you're in a tented wedding, you're not safe under a tent. It is a metal frame tent. You are not safe under a tent. There's they will stand certain winds, but your tent company may not even put it up if it's so windy. So we want to make sure your guests are safe, and making sure that we are making those calls ahead of time so that we don't run into that. We want to make sure that we have the plan ahead of time for your vendors so that at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever time that rain call is made, we're adjusting everything ahead of time so that everything can still run smooth and seamless throughout the day.
So what I'm hearing is for the audience listening in is think about what those, when a bride, a couple, a client for even a corporate event or a private party, when they are pressing you to work in unsafe conditions, have that script created of, we are unable to bring our electronic equipment out to DJ your party because 1, it will get destroyed, and 2, there's lightning within X amount of miles, right? Like have that script ready to roll so that, you're covering yourself and you're not being persuaded to work in conditions that are not up to.
Yeah, there has to be and that's the thing with your clients. Your clients have to trust you as not only a wedding professional, a planner, but they've hired you to trust your opinion and you to bring this wedding to life, seamlessly. I understand that what you envision for the day may have to be changed a bit towards the end. There's things we can control and things we can't control. It's funny because when we did move everything, I said, listen, we have to move everything. There's just no way around it right now. We're running into late times. We have to move everything. We're going to do this. You're going to adapt and overcome. And it's not going to be what you envisioned, but it's going to be absolutely stunning. This aisle that we created for her under an awning and under a long, like outdoor area that was covered and it was safe and it was beautiful. She had the longest aisle I've ever seen in a ceremony. It was absolutely stunning. It was at the Biltmore in Miami. And she came to me afterwards and she said, it's not what I pictured, but I could not have pictured it this beautiful in this location. And it just gave me the chills because it was like, it wasn't what she pictured, but it's okay. It's not always going to be what you pictured, but it's going to be okay. And at the end of the day, they're married. They had the most beautiful wedding, the most beautiful ceremony. Everybody saw the pictures are stunning because her walking down this aisle that was, looked like a quarter of a mile long was absolutely gorgeous. And she was so cute because she kept saying, I want my girls to have their moment. I said, they're going to have more of a moment now than they ever did because the other aisle was maybe 30 feet. Right. And this was like half of a football field of an aisle. And she was like, the pictures are just so dramatic of this aisle. And I said, you just walk and you smile and you enjoy the moment and everything else disappears. Because when you see your person at the end of the aisle, the weather doesn't matter. The rain doesn't matter. The change of ceremony location doesn't matter. Because what it's about is you walking to your person. And whether, I know when you get married and I got married, I don't care where I'm getting married, as long as I'm seeing my person and saying those vows at the end of the aisle. That's what it's about, and that's what everybody has to stay focused on for sure.
Yeah, I like so many times. I mean, being that I'm in the Keys, I'm like sitting here and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many stories to tell. The long aisle, I absolutely love that. If you have, I don't know if you have a blog or a gallery or anything that we could just share those images. I'm like picturing it in my head, right? And I want to share that. We had a wedding when I was a wedding specialist at a resort here where it was supposed to take place on the Bayside, and it was like strange January weather where a cold front came in. It was under 30 degrees. It was windy as all get out. And it was all the wind was hitting the Bayside.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't always typical. If it's windy, it's usually on the ocean side just because it's more open. And we actually, as a venue, had to shift to a different venue and get like general managers talking and insurance companies talking, and we did it, and it was probably like it was the talk of the town, that's for sure. Everybody knew what happened, and in the end they got married. It was gorgeous. It was some of my favorite photos. And just being in those situations, they didn't like, you know, the venues didn't necessarily want to do this, right? Because that's they're competitive. But in the end, collaboration happened. And guess what? Now those two teams, those two venues talk all the time.
Oh, for
and
sure.
work together all the time. And, you know, now they're referring business, and like, that's the power of community over competition. And it all happened because of some crazy storm.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with wind, I mean, it's not even rain. When it's too windy, there's a venue up in Stewart that it is so windy out the back. I immediately recommend don't do tall centerpieces, because we have had to move everything inside, because you don't want, even without a tent, your guests are going to be blown around. I always tell the bridal party, if you're outside, do your hair up, because you don't want those shots of the hair right in the face in the middle of your ceremony. But you have centerpieces falling on your guests. It becomes a liability, and it becomes an unsafe environment. And the whole thing is, you want everybody first and foremost to be safe, to enjoy the night and have fun, and be able to have everything go off without a hitch. Again, we have to adapt and overcome here and there, but it will always work out, and it will always be fine. Either way, you're getting married, and we're making it happen, and it's going to be beautiful. May not be exactly as you pictured it, but it will happen, and it will be beautiful.
Yep. So I'm just curious, I kind of threw this question in there, is I have like the app that I live and die by, and I was curious, when it's like wedding day and you feel like something's coming in, we're watching those percentages, is there a certain app that you love to just go to?
It's funny because I have multiple apps, and my entire team is on apps. But the week of the wedding, we send out like a little weather, congratulations, it's wedding week, to all of our vendors. This is what we're expecting. We'll keep an eye on those showers, rain calls made at this time, type of a thing.
Right.
So we worked through that. And right now we did a wedding on Saturday. It was 300 people in Jupiter. It was absolutely stunning. It was hot though. It did not rain a drop all day, but it was absolutely smoldering out there. So even at that, when there's a heat wave in Florida, you definitely want to make sure your elderly guests, there's a plan for them to come inside for a welcome party, come inside for the cocktail hour, because you don't want your guests melting outside. But there's multiple apps I use. My husband's a huge boater. He's always out fishing. So he has all of his, you know, weather apps for the ocean and oceanic. And he has, he uses buoy weather a lot to know the tides and this, that, and the other, which we do check a lot, because if we do grand exits on a boat, we want to make sure the tides are correct. We don't need somebody getting beached on a grand exit. Buoy weather a lot for the tides, things like that. WeatherBug is not as accurate for weather, but it's very accurate for lightning. So with lightning within a certain amount of miles, I definitely don't want guests sitting outside. I want to move everything inside. WeatherBug is fantastic for lightning. I use Storm Radar a lot through the Weather Channel, because it shows me the direction of the storm is coming, and it shows me exactly when the time is going to be. So, you know, there is times I'll go to the officiant, hey, we're going to hold off for about 10 minutes, or hey, you know, it's going to be I do, you make out real quick, and we got to move because this storm is coming. We got to get these guests in the cocktail hour. So we can adjust accordingly, making it a shorter ceremony or pushing back the ceremony, or starting it a little bit earlier if everything's ready with hair and makeup. And then of course with the Hurricane Center, any type of hurricane, tropical storm, depression, things like that, we're always on the National Hurricane Center app, making sure if we're in the cone, if there's any warnings going on and things like that, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Those are all apps that I've definitely had eyes on. I use AccuWeather just as like my home screen one because it
Yes.
tells you like, oh, rain happening in 15 minutes. Like, so that's one that I look at a lot. But I love when you were saying the tides. There's actually a venue here where if it's king tide, it floods.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
So
you need
when you book the venue, you have to be very careful about the dates. You want to be like on the opposite end. So
for sure, for
yeah,
sure. You definitely want to be
absolutely.
aware of those things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unless you have anything else to add, I've got some fun Q&A.
I'm good. I'm good. I
All
think we
right.
covered a ton.
So I'm curious, what is the last item that it could even be for yourself, but what's the last item that you bought for your business or for yourself that you're excited about?
I'm always checking out new swag for my office and for my vendors and for my out of season. We said we drop off a lot of swag bags to our vendors and things like that. I'm always buying new swag for my couples. The last item I bought was new business cards. It was one of those really, really, really fancy business card places that
Mhm.
it's matte black and it has a teal foil insert, which is like really, really cool. We handed out to a lot of our, upcoming couples and things like that. But business cards are like where it's at. We also have an electronic business card, which I'm obsessed with for
Mhm.
bridal shows, events, galleries, things like that. So I could just tap their phone. They have all the information. They can save it right on their phone. That's another one that's I think those are my two favorite things that I just recently bought for the business.
Yeah, I just did a digital card
Love
myself
it.
and I'm like, oh, I feel so free. Like, especially at networking events, I'm like, tap, tap, tap.
100
Like,
tap tap tap. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
easy. All right. And if we were meeting up in 1 year to pop a bottle of champagne on something for your life or business, what would that be?
Oh, we are going to be celebrating in a year. We're going to be celebrating our business growing even more. We are going to be celebrating a larger office for my team to start working really, really deep in. We're going to be celebrating one of my lead planners having her baby. So I'm giving her off just to have the baby. After that, she's got to come
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
We're celebrating that. We're celebrating a lot of things. We have huge, huge goals with our business. And we're pushing a lot of corporate events now. We're doing productions and things like that. Our Myrtle Beach office just did a huge concert series. So we are doing all kinds of different events. And that's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating more events, bigger events, and really just all of our couples for sure.
Yes. Well, I'll just have to come up to Palm Beach and we'll make a celebration
I mean, I
dinner.
think we should just schedule this now because let's bring the champagne and let's do this.
Yes, I know. There's always champagne in the fridge.
For sure, for sure.
Well, this has been amazing. There's so much I think that the vendors can pull out that they haven't thought of, like having the weather in the timeline, right? Having the call, thinking about how you're going to respond to some of these questions that your clients are going to have. Um, Remembering that in the end, the point is to get married and to celebrate your clients. And this has just been so wonderful, Jacque. Can you tell our listeners where they can connect with you, with Stunning and Brilliant, and what you guys, if there's anything you have that you want to point them to?
Absolutely. We have our website is all over. You can connect with any of our offices, everywhere from Dallas to Chicago down to Florida. We are all over the place. Our website is www.stunningandbrilliantevents.com. On our website, we'll be able to take you to, like I said, any office owner. You can connect on our blog, which is sbevents.com. We also have a podcast on that just started 2 weeks ago, and it's called This Takes the Cake. It's on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, as well as YouTube, which is a lot of fun because it's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen at weddings that people don't see that we are handling, funny stories, things that I always joke that we can have a reality show because the things that we have fixed, cleaned up, sewn, or seen at a wedding is just beyond. So that's a lot of fun too. We're doing a lot with that as well. So, and it's all of our offices. So definitely on our website. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is at Stunning and Brilliant Events. Feel free to follow us on there, and you'll see all kinds of stuff on there as well as far as our weddings and events that we're doing.
Love it. Love it. So we'll have all that in the show notes. Hopefully I can snag that gallery of that long
Oh yeah,
ceremony aisle from you.
it's
I'll drop
on there for
that.
sure.
Yeah, I'll drop that in the show notes too, so that you have some visuals on you during your lunch break. And yeah, and thank you so much, Jacque.
Thank you so much, Karen. It was so good connecting with you again.